welcome to the Talking Landscape Photography Show. I'm sitting on an island off an island at the moment, which is my home away from home, Bruny Island. So hence the background, and there's quite a lot of birds flying around me, so you'll hear them, and maybe the odd truck, but it's a beautiful spot. Now, I've been I've been wanting to engage with Roger Fishman for a couple of years now, and sometimes you just connect with someone virtually that feels like a brother from another mother, as I say, or a kindred spirit, and Roger's most definitely one of those human beings for me. And we've just actually had half an hour of just connecting before the show and telling stories and honouring Harold, who passed away in Iceland as well. But the space tonight is for Roger. Roger is lives on the other side of the planet in America, which is why you'll see him in the daytime, whereas normally running the show at night in terms of the clock. And geez, how do you sum up Roger Fishman from all those scenes? He's an artist, he's an adventurer, he's a poet, he's a writer, he's a speaker, he's a man who has found the self-awareness and courage to live a very authentic life true to his purpose and his artistic creative self, not just the conventional kind of how do I live safely in the world kind of self. He's gone places that probably most people alive will never see and may actually be gone soon even, which is something we'll maybe touch on the show. He has a love affair with water in all its form, and that's more his story to tell than mine, but a lot of that has translated to the polar regions of the world, and the Arctic and Antarctic sort of areas have been a big part of his journey in later life. He's a family man. He's a very approachable, very warm-hearted, and very present man from what I've engaged with over time. And I have the great pleasure of introducing him. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity. I'm so glad after these last couple of years we could make this happen.
Yeah, it's been a dance. Even this morning, look at I got the time wrong, but luckily we've both got open days, so we've got a big, beautiful open space for Roger to dance and share a bit of his story with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Roger. We really, really appreciate it. And I know just from the chat that we've had before the show that it's going to be a brilliant episode. So can't wait to see your amazing pictures.
Well, thank you both of you for having me. And just so everyone knows who's watching this, that while my hands are here, the magic is to my left. Melissa is off screen, but she's the one in charge of whatever you're about to see. She's figured it all out.
So Roger, for people that over at this side of the world that sort of haven't engaged with you or met you, or how would you like to paint a little welcome picture to them?
Well, look, I think it's always helpful to have a little bit of context, like where someone comes from, right? And perhaps some of their motivation. So the work that you see, you can understand why it's an expression of who they are. I grew up in a small little town back on the East Coast. I live in Los Angeles now, but I grew up in a small little town in Connecticut, and beautiful little place, quiet, residential. And my parents had a disastrous marriage. And there's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of noise. We lived upstairs, he lived downstairs. And the reason I tell you all that is sometimes, it was a very intense experience. And the one thing I found a lot of refuge in was literally going through National Geographic magazines. It was a way to travel, both metaphorically speaking in terms of seeing the world, but also practically speaking in terms of what was going on in my world at home. And I just fell in love with learning that there are all these other places and all these other cultures. Never in my dreams did I imagine that I'd be able to see some of these places and go to these places and have that privilege. So I grew up in that small town. Then I started traveling, and we were very, very financially poor. I had food stamps in elementary school for a bit of time, and so I understood the need to have to sort of, like we all do, right? Have to provide for yourself and for your loved ones. So after I got older, I ended up going to university. I left without graduating, but I had a job. And I started going down more of the sort of the corporate business creative marketing track. But what was interesting is every company would ask you the question at a retreat: if you weren't doing this job, what would you be doing? And for me, it was always like, I'd be traveling and taking pictures. That was always my response, even when I look back at the documentation of those places. And along the way, I also learned some harsh lessons, like we all learn. Like my father, who was divorced from my mother, died suddenly of his fourth heart attack at 46. And as painful as that was, and honestly still is, it was also one of those life lessons, right? Which is, there's nothing permanent in terms of guarantees about your life, that you need to live your life as true as you can for yourself, and hopefully in concert and collaboration with your loved ones. So as I started working, that was always with me. I always say, death is my shadow. And some people think, well, that's horrible. How could death be your shadow? I go, because it's a constant reminder of our limited time here. So it's actually an inspiration, really sort of an elevation of my consciousness of, I've got to go make things happen now, because now is all I have. So there became a time where, after I realized I could provide for myself, I could provide for my family, professionally, financially, that I also had this amazing, great fortune of our son being born. And of course, when you have a child, you wish for them everything. And you try to share with them what you've learned. And one of the things I would say to my son when he was born is, life is short, live fully, live your passion, live what's true to you, all those things. And I had my own company at this stage, my own production business, my own consulting business. And as I would hold my son, carry my son, love my son, talk to my son, I realized I'm telling him everything about what I've learned. Now I have to apply it to myself. So that's when I did really a life 180. I went from corporations to being an entrepreneur, to being really an artist and adventurer, which was really the truest to my soul. That actually goes all the way back to my childhood. So I wanted to live the words I was sharing with my son and be true to myself, and really engage both creatively, spiritually, but also to connect with a different type of community. And so, like, for example, here we are today. I get to connect with amazingly creative, talented people who have big hearts, who are not just photographers, but we're trying to tell stories that connect people, that open our hearts and make the world a better place. And so, it's a thrill for me to be here with you all today, to collaborate with the scientists I collaborate with now, collaborate with environmental nonprofits and musical artists, the pilots, and just the people that you meet along the way. So it's been a great gift. And by opening up my heart and taking that risk to go live truthfully and authentically, I've gotten back so much more than I could ever imagine when I was a little kid, or even 10 years ago. So for me, the lesson of my son now is, where you start is not where you have to end up. And where you are doesn't have to be where you'll be. But you have to go believe enough in yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will. So I always think the best bet in life is betting on yourself. And it's the only bet, truthfully, that really, really matters.
So I feel like wrapping that up in a little time capsule there, Roger. It's just freaking beautiful, man. And speaking of your son, I remember, we were lining up a time for the show, and Roger's like, well, actually, my son's just made the finals, and it's going to be a special day for him. Can we move the show? And I was just like, oh my God, that's so beautiful, to see where your priorities are, that you're walking and talk as a father and a parent, and really valuing and acknowledging, the people in your life that are the most important. And I was just like, hell yeah, well, sign me up. Where's the game? I'll come.
Next time, hopefully you will next time. He's an amazing son, and I really mean it. I'm completely madly in love with him. He's the greatest gift every single day.
Well, I lost my dad really young, Roger. I was a teenager, but he still has a huge influence on my life. But one thing I learned in reflection that you're kind of doing, I guess, with actions like that, is the greatest gift you can give your children is living authentically and modeling the kind of values that you think are important in the world. And I mean modeling as in living it, walking the talk, not just because that's just go one without the other. And that's, even though I didn't have my dad for, decades, I had him long enough to get all of that. He gave me an incredible value system and a wonderful moral compass, and that is still how I navigate my life by. And those two things, I think, are the paramount gift you can not only give your children, but give the world, I think. And just, and that's why I think you and I resonate so well.
Yeah.
Is we've done a bit of the work in the adversity and guess clarified the significance and importance of those things to guide how we live.
Yeah. And how wonderful that you get to remember and honor him by how you live, right?
Yeah. Certainly do my best. Big shoes to fill, but working on it. Lifetime project.
Always the case.
So you were just saying before the show, Roger, you're literally out the door in a few days to head back to Iceland, Greenland, yeah?
Yeah, so I head over there on Sunday. So I go to Iceland for 2 days, then I'll go to Greenland for 6. And each of those days we'll be doing a separate activity. We'll be out with dogs and dog sled. We'll be out, hopefully, ice caving, exploring. One day snowmobile, hopefully get out onto the frozen sea and be looking for, icebergs and hopefully bad conditions. And so that's a 6-day trip. And then I come back to Iceland and I'll see a good friend of mine. His name is Siggy. Siggy is an amazing drone pilot. He happens to also own the DJI store in Reykjavik. And so he and I don't know if you ever heard of, he's a phenomenal guy. He's so phenomenal. This is like the part about traveling that I love. Obviously we talked about, Hattie and Haraldor and what an amazing human being he was, right? And how he made you fall in love with him. As I said, it wasn't like a choice. It wasn't like, yeah, maybe I'll like the guy, I won't like the guy. Like you just fell in love with him. And then, my helicopter pilot, Matthias, is phenomenal. And then Siggy, and he's just a great guy. So we're going to spend 6 days driving around Iceland and just droning remote places and maybe doing a little heli ice caving. So we'll see what's possible. It's always weather dependent, of course. And then I come back. I have the privilege of taking my son, who's now certified in scuba diving. I'm going to take him to a 10-day scuba diving trip. And then I come back, and 3 days later, I go back to Greenland for a 10-day dog sledding trip with 2 friends of mine who are planetary sciences. So it's gonna be a busy time, fun time, but it's going from like warm weather to freezing cold weather, but all great people everywhere. That's what really makes it all so worthwhile.
I just get those magic 4 words coming up when I hear that. How big's your suitcase? I fit. Oh my God. I'm just like, that's a part of the world that I just have not had the privilege of getting to or experiencing. And it's just been on my radar and buzzing in my soul for, 30 years. And it's like, that's kind of my National Geo sort of area. And I'm probably one of the few landscape photographers I know that hasn't been to Iceland. Even Luke spent an amazing time there and in Norway as well.
So Paul, here's what we'll do. Let's make an agreement now. Just, that my pilot from Iceland happens to be coming in this week. He happens to be in the States. Why don't you and I make an agreement now that you and I are going to go to Iceland this year? Maybe in September. We'll go up for a while and we'll go have a good time. If you tell me your schedule, but we should make a commitment that we'll go figure that out together.
I think I'm open. I'll just check with
my
second.
Paulie, do it.
Okay, I'm being serious, by the way.
Oh, I know. I know you are actually, and that'd be a expletive yes. we don't sort of edit the show, so beep, 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 beep. There'll be lots of beeps going on in my neck of the woods, and I was thinking I was just one of the reasons I haven't. I was just waiting for the stars to align for the way I was meant to roll that. Sometimes when you just try and force things to happen and you think they should, you just got to back off and then wait for them to arrive. Maybe my moment's just arrived, Roger.
I think that'll be awesome. That'd be awesome.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, it's
Can't
funny.
wait to see what you'd come back with from there, Paul. Especially flying with Roger as well, and just even from the ground,
Well,
it'll
I
just be
think,
incredible.
like this is a conversation you'll have often in landscape photography is, do you go somewhere that's been done or is highly popularized, or do you then just, oh no, there's no point doing that. And I don't think that way. I was like, well, I haven't been there. I haven't interpreted it. I haven't built my own relationship with country and expressed it and explored it through my eyes. So I don't get too caught up in that conversation. At the same time, I'm still like you. I love to explore places that are unknown as well. But Ice is one of those places in Greenland that is so beyond exquisite in terms of the incredible power and diversity of landscape just transcends anything on the planet. That conversation is moot in my in my mind. I'm going. All right.
So look, I'm going to book that. I'm considering that done. And after this show, you can ask Melissa. By the way, you know Tom Putt really well.
Yeah.
I can be pretty persistent, so I think we'll just consider this a done deal. Now we'll just work out the logistics.
Oh my god. All right. We'll carry on that conversation for sure, my friend.
All right. Don't tell Tom though. Don't tell Tom, because then he's going to want to join, and that won't be any fun.
Oh yeah, no. Tom's like, it's like a sack of wet potatoes. That guy, isn't he? Like, he's so much fun, Tom. He's I don't feel bad because he gets out and about more than just about anybody in this country, actually, in terms of his workshops, and where he's actually he's been in Lake Eyre actually the whole week, actually, which I'm hoping to do in a few weeks.
Well, Paul, can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a quick?
Yeah.
I've always noticed that when Tom's traveling, whenever he posts pictures, he's usually incognito, and I'm always wondering if like Interpol is looking for him. Like sometimes he has a mustache, sometimes he's got shag hair. I can't figure it out.
He's not that incognito because he wears t-shirts saying like Tom Putt's awesome and stuff. like I'm not even joking. Like he was wearing one on the last time he had him on the show just a few weeks ago. Like, what's on the back of the t-shirt? It's like, I'm awesome. I'm Tom Putt. It's like, that's just Tom. He's so unashamedly celebratory about all sorts of things, and he's probably our he is actually. He's our number one go-to for the show. He's been on the show more times than any other photographer in the world, and he's always keen, and he's always ready, and he's always engaged. He's always got lots to say, and he's pretty fantastic individual, Tom.
Yeah, I love him. Although I have to be honest, I like Mary better. I like Mary a lot better.
So I'll let you steer where you want to go to next. Let's maybe start some storytelling of some of these relationships you built up with people and place around the world, Roger.
Sure. Well, years and years ago, I was on a small little boat going through the Antarctic Peninsula, and I just completely fell in love with icebergs. And one of the reasons I love icebergs is I find like there's a very close parallel to iceberg creation to human creation. So just bear with me as I take you through the parallel, okay? So you start off with an iceberg. You have to have like hydrogen and oxygen to create water, right? Water with the right temperature creates the right snowflake, right? Snowflake lands, becomes part of a glacier. So bear with me. Now humans, right? You have an egg and sperm create an embryo, right? So two come together to create one. Embryo lives in water, right, for 10 months. The snowflake lives on a glacier for 10,000 years. Right? At the end of 10,000 years, that glacier splits off, calves off. There's a large cracking sound, and an iceberg is created. After 10 months, what happens? A baby comes out. There's a large scream, usually from the baby crying, the mother's screaming, and a new life is born. So you have two new lives being born. And what happens with the iceberg? 10% is above the surface, 90% is below. Usually lots of edges, a lot of rough angles, and it's affected by what's outside, right above the water, and what happens below the water, temperature, currents, and then of course wind, sun. And what happens to us as human beings is we are growing. We're impacted by external influences, but also what's inside of us, nature versus nurture, right? So you have these two pieces. And what happens over time with an iceberg? It tosses and it churns, just like we're talking about life tribulations. and it smooths out to rough edges. And then over time, it goes back to it where it came from, right? To the sea and evaporated. What happens with us? We grow up. We smooth out our rough edges. I know I have a lot more to smooth out, but we all smooth out our rough edges. We toss and we turn. We have different trials and tribulations. And then eventually we go back to our maker as well. So to me, when I feel this parallel between the creation of icebergs and us, I feel like a deep affinity. So when I was in Antarctica, I felt that affinity immediately. And so I said, I'd love to photograph icebergs, not just from the boat, because it was a small boat, but it was, how do I give them a different perspective so we can feel them and see them differently and almost, humanize them. I said, I want to photograph them as portraits. And so I said, the only way to do that is really from a helicopter. So I decided to one day get into aerial photography. Melissa, my colleague, found these amazing images of Iceland, and I thought, I just have to go do that. Then we found Haraldur, Hattie in Iceland. And we also found another pilot, helicopter pilot, Matthias. And we planned our trip. And I was like, I'm going to go do this. I want to go photograph Iceland. And Hattie, as I mentioned, you fall in love with him the first time you meet him. And Matthias also is different but similar. And while I was there, I thought, could either one of you fly me to Greenland to photograph icebergs from the sky? And Matthias said to me, yeah, we could do that. And I was like, really? How would we do that? He goes, oh, we'll just fly over the Denmark Sea. I'm like, well, how long is that? He's like, 4 to 5 hours. So we're in a helicopter. I said, 4 to 5 hours over the open sea. He's like, yeah. But you're going to have to do helicopter underwater emergency training, which is what oil rig workers do, right? In case you're in a helicopter and they crash, there's uncontrolled or controlled. So I did that training, got my survival suit, and then we flew over to Greenland. Now, truthfully, for 4 hours of it, you just were over open water. It was like flying almost across America in terms of time, not distance. And then I remember seeing my first iceberg, and I just teared up. I'm very proud. It's not that I'm not ashamed. I'm proud to say I always have 3 reactions when I do my work. I'm either screaming, yelling, like that's unfucking believable. I can't fucking believe this is Mother Earth and I get to see it. Like I'm screaming it. First time my pilot heard me like that, he's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I'm in love. I'm in love. The other time is sometimes I just get the opposite. I get really, really quiet, like really zen. And I'm just like in this flow and just like this connection to the universe, but also my whole history. Like I feel like, oh, how I'm here. And I'm present and I'm here. I get really quiet. I just watch and I feel it. And then there are some times where I cry because, as you know, just to see what we all see, to feel what we get to feel, it's so different because of our perspective that we've been given by being up in the air. So that's what I did with icebergs. And for me, it was quite powerful. So I'm going to start off just showing you some of these photos from Greenland. And I'm not going to talk about each one. If you want me to talk about anything specifically, please tell me. But it's just to give you some context of really what I have felt and experienced and why they move me so much. And the one thing I would add, you're talking about people who go to photography school or art school, which I think is awesome that people do that. I didn't do that. I'm self-trained. I learned, like you were talking about, I've made so many mistakes and I keep making them. But that's part of this is my excuse for why I'm constantly trying to grow and learn new skills. I photograph what I love. I have to feel love. It's very simple. People say, well, how do you know what to shoot? When I feel that deep joy, that's when I push the button. There's no other thing. I don't think about it. I just feel it and it happens, right? And we'll spin in the helicopter multiple times if we can. And I'll be talking to him as I'm leaning out, and we have a special rig set up. But it's only to me about feeling that joy, that love, and my deepest desire to share that with everybody, to have everyone realize what a great gift we have and to share out really the beauty of planet Earth. So we'll start showing some here. So if it's okay with you guys, I'm just going to run through these, and if you want to ask me anything.
Well, I think just to set context, and I think it'll come through in your very, very recent work, is you use the word portrait of iceberg, and I think that's, you've already alluded to the beautiful kind of overlay of the life cycle of the berg, and the mirroring of the human aspects, and one thing that really strikes me about Roger's capacity as an artist is he can bring qualities into images that can translate into a portrait of a landscape. Like it's a simple word, but it's a powerful word that involves a lot of connection and understanding of subject matter that not many people sort of choose to really apply so deliberately or so intuitively in Roger's case. So I'll just let that simmer through you as we go through some images. But
I appreciate that. And I try to create, as a lot of artists do, bodies of work. And there's always an overlap, because my fundamental belief is there's an ephemeral and eternal part of both nature and our behavior, because we're always changing, right? That's the ephemeral part. And the eternal part is the impact we leave with others around the planet. And so I love this notion of transformation, because that whole notion of how we're created, how an iceberg is created, is always about transformation from one form to another, that things are always changing and never really certain. So what you'll see here is, this is the beginning is in East Greenland, and then you'll see me in West Greenland, portraits of icebergs, but hopefully where people feel the intimacy and the beauty and the uniqueness of each one, just like all life is beautiful and unique. And in this one, you can just see that waterfall just gently coming down, lightly coming down. But as we all look for the lines, the details, the simplicity, and also the raw power. I think it's fascinating for me to think it's 10,000 years in the making, though, is what we get to experience.
wow.
This one always feels to me like I'm in outer space.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. That looks a lot like Tasmania, actually, Roger.
Well, if I will give this to the Tasmanian government if that's the case. They can have the image.
I've never seen anything with that kind of separation and layers, the under and over, and the triple kind of layering of the tonalities as well, like
the greens and the blues.
It's magnificent.
Well, it's also, I don't know how it is when you're doing your photography in terms of New Zealand or Australia, when you do the aerial work. For me, it was a big learning process. Like, what's the right time of day to photograph an iceberg?
Yeah,
because you're getting tremendous reflection. And so you go, oh, maybe we'll go early in the day. But what you lose when it's early is you lose the depth of the color underneath the iceberg.
Underneath, yeah.
So what I have to do is I have to shoot as fast as I can with my Hasselblad, and also increase the aperture, just sort of get less bounce, right? And keep the detail of the iceberg so you can really feel it and see it, but also allow yourself to have that color. And naturally, by doing that, the water sort of starts to disappear. So it was, for me, an interesting discovery of trying to find that right balance between all these different pieces, including, like I said, the time of day. But
what's just striking is their isolation and their independence almost from, they have their own space and place and the way that you've interpreted them. And yeah, for an aerial project in Australia, Roger, that was a big lesson for me too. Like being a traditional landscape photographer and then moving into aerial, particularly ocean-based stuff. It's, I went for the traditional, early, late, and it just doesn't work in water environments very well. You lose that that wonderful capacity to relate to what's under the surface, just get a reflective surface really in early light, and those rays just need to come down higher to be able to penetrate deeper into the water and start lighting up sort of the storyline of what's happening underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I also love about what you're saying is, you learn from each experience, right? And each location. And what I also love about, at least for icebergs, is, because we tend to do 1, 2, maybe 3 rotations. And as I mentioned, my camera takes 1 shot a second, so it's slow. But you really get to study your subject, right? Essentially 2 to 3 different times from a 360 perspective, and really get to identify what's the most intimate way to bring its beauty to life. It's a rapid decision-making process, I accept, but that's where that whole, your heart kicks in, right? Your heart starts to just, when you're like, oh, that's it. And sometimes you just wait until you get one more chance and then you move on. But for me, it's very personal. Like, I'm really trying to bring out that specific beauty of that specific personality of that iceberg. So, and then of course, as you know, you're looking for like, where's the light coming from? Because sometimes, as you know, you can wash it out way too much. So the good news is when I have that relationship with my pilot, which I do, you really get to have a collaboration. And then you get that joy out of each moment of knowing that together, you being able to share the experience of seeing what you see, and also being able to hopefully capture it properly.
How hard is it to find these sort of icebergs? Are they sort of a dime a dozen, or the ones with real character like this one, you could be searching for hours?
The answer, well, I'd like to say that, it's one or the other. In some areas, there can be like hundreds of icebergs. The challenge with that is then they're usually close together, right? Because they might be broken off from a glacier. So there's no space in between them. And then to find something like this, and this is the only one I've ever seen like this. This one took a lot of time. So it varies. Sometimes they're very isolated, depending upon where you are. And then, like, for example, this is on the southeast side of Greenland. We were up north near one of the fjords, and we found this. But that was probably, a good hour and a half, 2.5 hours of flying before we saw it. Now you go to the flip side, you go to the west coast to Lulusa and Disco Bay, and that bay has got hundreds of icebergs. And then in some areas, you'll find the isolated ones, but a lot of times they're close together. So the answer is it's both. It takes time. And if you're fortunate, like this was one of my favorites. This was about, my pilot thought about 500 feet tall. Doesn't look it, and that's above the water.
Wow.
Right. So yes, they happen. It's like anything else. The more that you wander, the more that you'll discover.
And you've been flying over these areas for a while now. Have you seen for yourself the effect of climate change, and more broadly, do you sort of use some of your photography as commentary over that?
It's a great question. So I've flown around Greenland 3 times and literally circumnavigated the country. So starting from Kulusuk to southeast, going south to Narsarsuaq, all the way over the north, all the way over the national park, all the way over to Scoresby Sund, and then back to Iceland. And there's certain places we've gone back to multiple times. And clearly you see a change, as you would think anything would change. But what I did last trip is I brought with me a whiteboard with markers, and I did research on what's the historical temperature norms in certain areas for the month of July, which is when I typically go. And then we'd land in those places. We'd look at the temperature based on what was going on in the helicopter. And then I write down the date, GPS coordinates, right? Historical temperature, current temperature, and change, percentage change. And what we found pretty much was it was at least 25% warmer than historical data would suggest. And that's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, very much.
Now, and the most northern part of Greenland, to your question, this is now, I think 3 years ago, the most northern part before you head off to the North Pole. The historical temperature up there was in the summer was like 44 degrees as a high. The day that I was there, the days I was there, it was 73 degrees.
Jeez.
I put on shorts that day. I'm in the most northern part of planet Earth, right, in Greenland, and I was wearing shorts because it was 73 degrees. So I am not a scientist. I collaborate with scientists, a lot of different scientists, from MIT, Woods Hole, Columbia, UCLA, and they can speak from a scientific perspective. I can say what I did as a weather change project, there's a dramatic change. And from my actual experience, there's no question that it's getting much, much warmer. I mean, look, even last year in Siberia, they had over 110, 115 degrees temperature. Sorry for doing Fahrenheit to everybody, but
I was just going to say, for those playing at home that are from Aussie, 73 Fahrenheit's actually about 22 degrees Celsius. So it really does give you a pretty clear, that's just generally standard room temperature. So to have that in a polar region is very alarming, I would say.
Yeah. So yeah, we have seen change. There's no question. And there's certain places I go back to every time in Greenland because I love them. And you see a lot of change. And how much of it is human accelerated climate change versus just natural? That's too difficult. I'm not the right person to answer that. But I always say, just from a data perspective, 20,000 years ago, humans started. 20,000 years ago to 1820, we had 1 billion people in 20,000 years, right? So 20,000 years, we had 1 billion people. From 1820 to 1920, we doubled the population, went to 2 billion. So what took us 20,000 years, we now did in 100 years. In 1920 to 2020, we went from 2 billion people to 8 billion people. So now we quadrupled in 100 years, what we had doubled in 100 years, which used to take us 20,000 years to go create. So just from a numerical perspective, and people can say it's 7 billion, it's not 8 billion. The point is, we have an impact. And so it makes sense that things are changing. And it makes sense that we own part of that.
And do you feel a responsibility in terms of what you do to make commentary on that through your photos, or is it more just let the photos speak for themselves and people can make their own connection there?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And honestly, it's a topic I've struggled with, to be very honest with you. I do a lot of work, as I mentioned, with scientists and their projects or mine. I collaborate with a lot of environmental nonprofits to be supportive. I talk about my work because all of what I do is more philosophical. It's about self-reflection, about where I want people to see themselves in the artwork. I don't mean literally, but in terms of the transformational perspective, how we are also beautiful, but how we are also changing or crumbling. But I also feel like I want to celebrate life. I really want to celebrate life. I believe a lot of people are covering the other subject really, really well, brilliantly well, actually. For me, I want to come back to the essence of the beauty of the gift of life for me. And I want to constantly engage with it, fall in love with it, and learn from it. And that's really more the perspective I take with my artwork, is to celebrate the beauty.
That's a really great approach in some ways too, because there's plenty of people already making comment around that, and sometimes that can get in the way of your own appreciation or what you want to do with your work. I've certainly come across that from an environmental perspective, and people wanting to make comment or to be have an environmental focus on what you do because you're out in the landscape all the time. And I sort of feel that that's my decision to make that, not other people's decision to make that. And so I think that's a very wise approach, and don't let that affect how you want to go about what you do. So no, that's really great. And I'm glad Glad to hear that perspective.
For me, I feel like if you fall in love with a person, with an animal, with nature, all of energy, if you fall in love, the more that you're in love with something or someone, the more that it means to you, and the more that something means to you, the more you're going to want to take care of it. So I want people to come to their own place because they're in love with planet Earth and nature and the both scientific beauty, but the magical beauty of it all, and then refine their own lives accordingly. For me, that's what it is. It's about falling in love over and over and over again, and then living in a way that's consistent with that.
So, Roger, I'm also aware that you have done a lot of collaborative work with scientists and different people, and that I'm sure has both expanded and maybe acknowledged the significance of the environmental aspect and conservation aspect of what you're privy to. There's not many people in the world that get to the places you've been to, and their condition that directly is affecting the rest of the world in terms of climate change. And so how would you sort of describe, and I appreciate the fact that as an artist, you're letting yourself, be true to your creative self, but I also know that, you are aware of the bigger picture of it all, and you have created collaborations to allow that your work to support that conversation for other people that may be more informed or better educated to do so. So do you want to talk a little bit about how that developed?
Sure. Well, every case is almost somewhat different. And I'll give you an example. I've collaborated with one scientist. His name is Benjamin Weiss, head of planetary sciences at MIT. And he was actually studying when did planet Earth turn on and get connected to the entire universe, which is much higher than my intellectual or pay grades allows me to even think about. But the way that I met Ben, which is a great story, is I happened to be in Nuuk, Greenland, doing my work. And I saw this guy walk by me, and he looked American. And I just said to him, "Hey, where are you from?" And he looked at me, he's like, "Boston." "Where are you from?" I said, "Los Angeles." And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm studying when planet Earth turned on and connected." And I was like, yeah. Smart people. No, it was really fascinating, but it was really quite amazing. And he said, "What do you do?" And I said, I just do this. He's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm here to do aerial photography." So he went back, he left, and I looked him up. I thought, this guy is really, truly brilliant. I went back to the hotel, and there he was with 8 other scientists. And I said, "Where are you guys going?" Because they had all their gear out. He said, "Oh, we're going up to the Issawa Greenstone Belt because we have a good weather window. We're going to go out now. We've been here for a few days. We're going to get out." So I said, "Hey, can you give me your GPS coordinates where you're going to be staying?" And everyone was like, what do you need our coordinates for?" I said, I just want to have your coordinates. And they said, but why do you need them? And I said, "Okay, look, the truth is because I like my coffee black." And I don't know these people, right? And they're like, "What?" I go, "I just like my coffee black." So they showed me the coordinates. I took a picture. I texted it to my pilot. I said, "Can we go by there tomorrow?" And he said, "Yeah, whenever it's your decision. Yeah, we can go there." So the next morning, they took off. I'm in town. The next day we take off. And all of a sudden we're going exactly where the coordinates tell us to go. And I see all this base camp set up. And we land next to it. And I get out, and I brought with my 10 chocolate bars because I knew they'd be hungry for something sweet. And I got out, and they were like, "Who are you? Like, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I told you, I like my coffee black." And they said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I'd like my coffee black, please." And they're like, "Really?" So they made coffee. Here we are in the middle of nowhere, essentially. And out of that, I created this wonderful friendship with several scientists, but one specifically is Ben Weiss, the guy I met the day before in Nuuk, and become very close friends with him and his wife. They're amazing people. So they were studying the Issawa. I photographed it for them. I filmed it for them. And the following year, I did the same. And they used it in part of their scientific presentations. I've also gone overseas and, like I said, shared my photographs with scientists who are looking at and studying moulins and what's going on with moulins over in Greenland. Larry Smith, who's now at Brown, was studying the albedo effect and what's going on with the changing ice sheet. So I share all my photographs with all the scientists. So I'm constantly collaborating with scientists before I go and saying, here's where I'll be headed to. What can I do for you if I'm in that direction? And then the next stage was, I also want to collaborate with environmental nonprofits. So there's one called NRDC, which is quite well known here in the US, National Resource Defense Council. And the other one is Conservation International. And I thought, well, I have a lot of footage available. I'd like to put together some videos and help promote the environment through these wonderful nonprofits. And I started working with musical artists. Portugal the Man, another gentleman named Peter Himmelman, great artist who I've now become very friendly with. So I just started working with different artists around the world. So there's different ways, I think, to go support the environmental work being done and supporting the scientists. And there's also a way to keep focused on your own individual creativity, which is about the love of planet Earth. So I look at them as three silos that overlap, but also stand alone by themselves. And that's how I try to approach everything I do. Collaboration with scientists, collaboration with environmental nonprofits, collaboration with other musical artists and other artists, and then just my pure art. And that's how I think about all my work. I try to be as holistic as I can, and also get as much impact out of all this time, all the effort, and obviously all the preparation and investment. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I think about all of my work, is how do I cover those important bases before I take off. So when I come back, I can provide as much really practical scientific value as well as creative benefit back to everybody else.
But also, you must also, as a flow-on effect, just have an amazing sense of satisfaction to know that you're also contributing to something much bigger than just your art as well.
Absolutely. I think that is the greatest part for me is always going to be the collaborations, right? The people that you meet scientifically, environmental nonprofits, also just the people you meet along the way. Even people in Greenland, they've never seen their country this way. So when I was at the weather station, which is in northeast Greenland, called Denmarkshaven, it's the Denmark weather station, and we stayed there. They'd never seen any of this before. So I actually gave them a presentation to all these scientists there. People I never met. We landed, they allowed us to stay in their place. And I said, look, I'm glad to share my work with you. So everywhere I go, I try to elevate the artwork above and beyond and connect it with as many people who are interested as possible.
Well, that's fantastic. Can you say much about this location, Roger, in terms of the glacier, and I guess that iceberg must have floated in from somewhere else, because it looks like it's been a while since the glacier was creating its own iceberg.
No, you're right. This was up near a place called Upernavik, northwest Greenland, and we were flying back south and trying to get down towards Ilulissat. And it was a really rough day, a tremendous amount of turbulence. You can see it sort of in the skies. And this is one of those cases where, we had to move quickly. And my pilot and I have a sort of an unwritten agreement, which is if there's something magnificent, just stop them, especially a case like this. So like Paul, like you, like all of us, we want to have a visual story. We want something that brings us in and then also makes us wonder, right? It's sort of that emotional surprise of like, what is that? How did that happen? Where did that iceberg come from? And then you look up at that glacier and you go, oh my gosh, it's receding. You're like, wow, it's receded a lot. And you think, well, why is that? So I like it when people can feel their own questions in a visual story, where they can ask themselves what's happening and why. And then relate it back also to themselves and what's going on in the world. And so I felt like this was one of those cases where it creates a lot of questions, tells you a lot, and allows you to decide what does it mean to you. and what do you want to do about it?
Yeah, we've spent sort of 10 to 15 minutes looking at this, and I am still exploring the stories that can come through and around this, conceptually and environmentally, climate wise. I can visualize, what that glacier might have been like, full to the edge, and it's lots of conversations about time, about temperature, about movement, about fluidity, and so it's one of those definitely one of those images that freezes something beyond itself. Like it's a frozen moment in time, but it's also representing a great length of time at the same and the same moment, which is not always something that happens. And it asks as many questions as it answers, and that to me is a very powerful image because of that.
And that's what that Greenland really does for you. It's full of different stories, different lives. And even when it looks quiet, as it does here, everything is in a constant state of flux. So this is.
Roger, do you have preferred conditions to photograph I can see there's quite a varied range of conditions, with some being more sunny and some being more cloudy, and do you sort of decide that the weather is overcast today, so we won't go out, or is it really just when it's really feral, sort of inclement weather, that you're actually just staying back at base?
It's a really wonderful question, and I've refined my answer to that over my trips. And the simple answer I have now is, if I can fly, I go. And for a simple reason: when you're there, you never know when you'll be back. You never know if that moment will ever happen again. And so as long as it's safe, I go, let's fly. And we'll see if we can create and capture, compose and design something that's magical. Sometimes, yes, we go out and we go, okay, it's not working, we got to come back, within an hour. Sometimes you go out and you go, oh my gosh, if I get under that cloud cover over that mountain pass, it opens up too. So as we all know, you don't know until you go. And so part of the rule I have is, if we can fly, we fly.
And Roger, I guess, it's a wild place, and there must be some crazy weather systems that come through, and very specific safety aspects of flying in particular. Like, I've never heard of a chopper flying over 4 hours of water, for instance. Like, even with all the chopper pilots I fly with over here, they won't go anywhere near the water. And if there's more than a 10-minute journey over water, like, sorry, we can't even do it. And so that was something that I learned the hard way, sort of early on, about the limitations of flying. So, and it's such a remote place with such extreme weather conditions, and dealing with icing and winds and visibility issues. Like, I guess you got to pick a specific time of year for starters, and then also, I guess, because it's so volatile, I'd assume at times that you just got to take every window you get, because your time's limited, pilot time's sort of limited as well, and I'm a bit like you in that I don't necessarily need a specific condition to tick all the boxes, because I'll adapt to what's there and create the beauty in what's presented and adapt accordingly. And that's part of the beauty of, and the challenge of being a visual artist, is responding to your landscape as much as visualized.
That's exactly right. The first time we flew to Greenland, we waited many days for certain weather conditions. And that's when I learned, don't wait. And then the other thing I learned on the first first expedition was, every night we'd go back, and if we had cellular connection, which often you don't, there's not a lot of good weather reporting around Greenland. It's too large, it's too remote. In a lot of places, nobody lives there. So we would spend like an hour, 2 hours every night looking at different weather apps and different weather patterns, and then we'd be like, okay, tomorrow, here's what we'll do. And then we'd wake up and it would be completely different. And so we did this for like 2 to 3 weeks, and then I realized this is like every night we're just wasting time. So we decided, here's what we'll do. We're going to go to sleep and we'll wake up, and then we'll decide what's going to happen. It's really not any more complicated or sophisticated than that, because every time we're sure what tomorrow looks like, every time it's like, tomorrow will be a great day. it's never a great day. And every time my pilot, who I respect completely, says to me, yeah, tomorrow's going to be a bad day, we're not going out, at least half the time, maybe 3/4 of the time, it turns out to be a great day. And it's not because he doesn't know, it's because Greenland is so massive, the weather patterns are always changing. And the truth is, there's not a lot of information, really good data coming in because it's so remote. So we just sort of have to take it day by day. And I'd rather go up and even just feel Greenland than sit at home in a tent or in a lodge waiting for the right conditions. To me, I have to go. I have to feel it. I have to immerse myself in it because I know it's changing all the time, and therefore I have to change and adapt to it as well.
So Roger, there's one aspect of that conversation for me, which is probably relevant to me personally, and maybe some of the viewers, like there are huge costs involved in flying around in choppers, and that's often what dictates the intensity of how I'm looking at weather windows, and because going up and checking something for an hour might cost thousands of dollars. How do you sort of navigate that aspect of these trips? Because they must have some pretty big budgets to be able to get the places you do, and you don't have to answer that, but I've been quite curious when I've been looking at how many people in the world have gone around Greenland twice in choppers.
Well,
There's a fair bit of a cost involved.
Oh, there's no question. I look at things so on multiple levels in that regard. One is, how much do I think this is going to take in terms of just pure dollars? Then I go, how many images do I have to sell? I do a simple spread and go, okay, what time frame do I think I could sell those? 3 years, 5 years? What's the break even? Right. Then the second piece is, I've got to go do this because this is for me. This is for my life. And that that supersedes everything else that would be logical and rational from a financial point of view.
Yeah.
So I always think this is my one chance in life. When I'm there, I'm going to invest what it takes, and I will deal with the consequences over time. And so that's the only way I can do it. I know that a lot of times, especially my first trip, I was like, this day isn't perfect. This day isn't perfect. I don't want to invest that kind of time and money, and you do think that through, there's no question. And Melissa will tell you too, there's times where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to fly in Iceland because it's just too flat, the lighting, and I need the right lighting. Greenland's different. You can get to Iceland. For me, you can anyone in the world can get to Iceland. And Iceland's magnificent. It is glorious, but you can get there. But when you get to Greenland, you can't hold back because you can't get to Greenland. Not many people want to fly across the open water for 4.5 hours. Not many people can. So that's where I go, my brain changes. And I go, this is the opportunity, the gift I've been given. I have to go do it now. And I'm not cavalier about it, but I also realize it's rare to be able to, and I don't want to miss a day. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, you have. I'm a little bit like that too. I just did an entire aerial safari around the whole of Australia in 6 weeks in the middle of COVID. And I didn't have the money. I was just like, my soul needs to do this. I'm just crying out to fly, and I'm just shriveling up without it. And my soul just feels expanded even thinking about it. And I was like, I'll worry about the rest later. And I just went for it. And it was freaking epic beyond my imagination in so many ways. And, little nuances looked after me. It was 3 cities I went through that closed down with COVID behind me that I could have got stuck in or not been able to get through. And it all just worked out with the skin of my teeth. And I'm still paying off the trip now, sort of, 6-8 months later, but it's a long game, and
it's a long game. It's a long game with a short life.
Yeah.
Right?
Long life, and, the opportunities can be small. And so, jump at it when they're there. And I guess Greenland but I don't think people sort of understand how extremely remote some of the places you're getting to are, and how beyond human kind of interaction or any sort of normalcy of accessibility a lot of these places. I know you kind of very politely just nuanced it, but in terms of the reality of where you're getting to, I don't think people understand. Like, there's big consequences of things happening out where you are, and really, really extreme feedback loops on when things go wrong that puts this in a league that stands alone, which is why, you know, there's few people on earth that have ever sort of photographed or been to where you've been to.
But to your point, and I want to give my pilot tremendous credit, you know, the amount of preparation, logistical, safety, legal, bureaucratic, and there's a tremendous amount of preparation. And then also, sometimes you just fortunately deal with good people. And what I mean by that is, like, we were up in the northwest town called Konik. It's northwest Greenland you can get next to Thule, not next to, but the closest one near the Thule military base. And, you know, we needed some fuel because, you know, without fuel, right, you're not flying. And it just so happened there were some scientists there that day. And I just happened to text someone I knew only by phone call and by email back in Colorado. She happened to be in Greenland. I told her what I was up to. She told me what these other scientists were. I said, oh, do you know how we can get fuel out there? She goes, oh, I have a chopper going out tomorrow. Let me see if I can bring you any fuel. And she's like, how much do you need? I said, how much can you bring? How much will it cost? And then all of a sudden, they delivered, essentially dropped off 4 barrels of fuel for us. And, you know, it would not have been possible to do on my own. So this is like the connectivity of planet Earth and good, and I think a positive karma. And it just coincidentally happened. And that allowed us to fly in places that you couldn't fly otherwise. So I love not knowing, but I also love knowing that my pilot's prepared. And I will say, Paul, you're exactly right about one thing. Because of the range of where we can fly to, because of his R66 and the auxiliary tank, you can get about 5.5 hours of flight time in. So if you're out past 3-4 hours from the nearest village or airport, usually there's no one there who can come save you. Because where you are, planes can't usually land. They can't land on the glacier easily. And because of the distance, because of the way that my pilot has brilliantly architected things, the local helicopters can't fly that far. So there is a reality to, you would likely not be rescued or rescued quickly or easily, if at all, if something goes wrong. And I do take that serious, as I know he does. And we've been fortunate. And I feel really, really appreciative. And, you know, hopefully that'll continue. But it's, you know, as you know, things happen and we all just try to do the best we can and prepare the best we can. And for me, it's life. Like, I feel compelled to go to Greenland. I literally, to me, it's like walking into, like, if essentially hit my heaven. I have to be there. And I literally see now glaciers and mountains that I remember year to year, and I talk to them. And they're like my friends, like my family. So it's all worth it because it's very, very spiritual. It's a way for me to have a relationship in a way that I can't really explain, even to myself. And it's a visual poetry that constantly is etching into my heart. So in a way, it's
like
just
that relationship. It seems like that relationship just keeps going. Is it a lifetime love affair? Do you see it? Your focus shifting somewhere else, or you pretty much this is your thing?
Yeah, I plan on coming down to Australia because I feel as if I should harass Tom Putback for all the harassment he's given me. But no, if I can, I would go to Greenland every year for the rest of my life. It's that. I mean, look at this little village. I mean, you fly over it, and I flew drone from there too. All the school kids came out, and it was just magical. So yes, to answer your question, I hope to go there every summer for the rest of my life.
So it's pretty fair to say then that's your favorite place in the world.
Yes. To photograph, yes. There's isolation that I've never felt before. And you're isolated from people and you're isolated from certainty, but you're connected spiritually. You could call it religiously, sort of to the essence of the whole universe. It's,
you know, by definition, I think that's what happens when everything else gets out of the way. There it is.
yeah.
You know, like that's the connecting with spirituality. That's ultimately what is going on. The rest of it is just clutter around the top and everything else. And I think, you know, by going somewhere with such intense isolation, that's exactly what gift you're giving yourself, I guess, is clarity
Absolutely.
of space, and that's really what's going on.
It's also
my-
uniqueness, I guess, as well, because of how remote you're going. You know, some of these landscapes must have been, you know, very infrequently or perhaps never photographed in this way before.
You know, I think it's fair to say that we possibly were the first people to ever circumnavigate Greenland in a helicopter and genuinely circumnavigate it. Because you have to have approvals and permit approvals to go into the national park. In certain areas, you have to have approvals and input and letters of recommendation from scientists because you're doing scientific work as well. And then you have to find, where do you get fuel? And then you have to get approvals when there are bases. There's a military base called Station Nord that you have to get approvals from. So it's a very complicated long-term process for each trip. And I will say for myself, you never see other people flying around. In fact, during COVID, the first year, we were flying around, and every time we landed, the airports, there was no airport traffic, there was nobody in the country. And we would land and people would be like, "What are you doing here?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, we knew you were coming because you're the only person on the radar for the entire country. Like, there's no commercial flights. Like, you guys are the only action. But what are you doing here?" And it was, in fact, at one part, the Denmark government, their sort of aviation force called into one town and said, like, talk to these guys and get more details from them. Like, how did they even get into the country? Because at that stage, nobody literally was flying. So I would say, yes, it's highly likely that most people have not photographed or seen or been to these places, except for maybe military jets flying over.
How did you get around the COVID business, getting in and out of Greenland?
Well, you know, when we first went, it was July, 2020. So it was still sort of earliest stage with COVID. And when we got there, people really weren't as concerned, except that there was no traffic coming in, right? When we went back the following year, it changed a lot. There were a lot of requirements. We couldn't stay in certain places. People would come out and greet us with masks in some areas. We had police show up at Kangerlussuaq with masks on, asking for our approval to show that we were allowed to be there. We were up in Ilulissat. Same thing happened. They almost impounded the helicopter. Fortunately, after 4 hours, they realized all the paperwork was in order. So we had just been both very careful and very lucky, to be honest. It was, but it's very peculiar to fly into an airport and there's nobody there, no people, no personnel. And and when you would fly in, you'd have to call like an hour ahead, and then an air traffic controller who would work in town would come out and then help you land, do the paperwork. And then you'd have to call an hour in advance, so they would bring out the fuel truck. So you get refueled ideally that day, and we would be the only people.
Mm. Accentuating that isolation even more.
Yeah. It was ultra remote. This part now you're saying just, is the national park in Greenland. We just wandered into this area. We have a video I'm glad to share with you about this area if you'd like to see it. We went back there a second time the next day. I'd never, ever experienced anything like this before.
Oh my God.
In fact, I'm going to actually go back. I'm going to ask if it's okay with you all just to share a video from this place so people can have even more context. Is that okay?
Oh, please do.
Let me just pull up that one.
Oh my God, Roger.
So literally we were just flying over to Northeast Greenland, the national park, and we just decided to go down this mountain range. We'd never been there before, right? And this is really what we saw. And so what happens is, I don't know how it is for you, my pilot often drops me off in an area because it's not safe for him to land, and then he takes off. And so I just stand there by myself and I fly the drone and try to film and capture the beauty. And then in the old days, I try to wave to him to get me back. Now we have a more sophisticated connection on phone, satellite phone. So here we go. I'll just play this little video. This is from the National Park of Greenland.
Oh, there you are. Oh my God. Jeez. Holy smokes.
Those holes in the ice with the dramatic blue color, they must be very deep too. That's fantastic.
It is very deep, and it's very alluring. Literally you want to walk, you want to go closer. If you had a scientific team, you could actually get your microspikes and sort of climb down into it if you're roping in. And I would love to do that.
It must be a bizarre feeling, Roger, like literally being left alone in a place that you're quite likely to be the only human being that has ever stood. And not many people alive will ever get that experience, let alone as consistently as you have. And I can't even imagine what it feels like just being there, realizing just, oh my God, you're just the only human being alive, like that's ever been there.
Yeah, in the beginning, I'll be honest, the first couple of times I did this, I would be, oh my gosh, I'm by myself. And, you would hear the ice crack or creak and you're like, oh my gosh, I just got to fly, get the footage and come back. And you almost had a tough time being in the moment because you'd hear these different sounds. And then you start to get more comfortable and you realize it's one that's just natural. 2, where you are is solid, right? And 3, the helicopter's only, a kilometer, 2 kilometers away. Look back here soon enough. And then you get to really be in the moment and in that flow. And, it sounds, I don't know if it sounds silly or not. I feel such an immense and intense level of responsibility when I'm filming, because I know it's the one opportunity I have to capture what Mother has created and to share it. And I just like photography, but the photography, I get a few more shots. I can look at the back of my camera, right? Okay, I got it. But with the film work, I really go, I have to get this and bring this back so people can feel as much as they can what I'm experiencing and all this beauty. So I take it quite seriously when I'm out there, not just from a safety perspective, but creatively, because I want everyone to go, whoa, that's Greenland. I've had people write me and say, I thought Greenland was a vast wasteland. But now that I've seen your art and your work, I understand how beautiful it is and what we have at risk. And I thought, excellent, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Roger,
So,
from a practical point of view, what are you flying with? And how does it happen? And how many zillion batteries you cost?
well, it's great. So each trip's been different. I used to fly like large drones, and I got down to the Mavic 2 Pro. Now I have the Mavic 3. I always keep at least 4 batteries with me. I think now I have 8. Obviously, there's a longer life for them. But the challenge is, as we all know, is when you're out this remote, you can't always get access to power.
Yeah.
So we always need jet fuel. I always need power. And obviously we have food. Those are the 3 things I have to have. So sometimes I go, okay, what happens if I don't get power for 3 days? So I always have to have enough storage, enough battery life to get me through at least 2, hopefully 3 days, if we can't get access to electricity of some sort or generator.
I've got a question about the Mavic 3, actually. I was interested in it, and I actually returned it because it didn't have the panorama feature working when it first released.
Right.
Is that a feature that you use at all? And is the implementation in the Mavic 3 as good as the Mavic 2?
Well, it's a great question. So I have it. I've only used it once or on one trip so far, because as you know, it just came out. I'll be using it on this upcoming trip, hopefully. They've updated, I think, all the software items that they didn't have at launch. I love the zoom feature as well, because now also you don't need a zoom drone and a non-zoom drone. It also put a wide angle on it. And the 5.1 or 5.3K. I mean, the quality of the data is so magnificent. I think it's worth it. I think they make amazing drones. And what's interesting, by the way, just as a related note to it, where I'm going in Greenland, we're going to be near an airport. And as we all know, you can't fly drones around airports. And there's that geofencing. And so all credit goes to Melissa with some direction from our friends at DJI. We think that we've learned how to unlock the geofencing with all the right approvals from the airport and from DJI. So it allows us to fly in areas that are usually restricted. So I'd say 3 things. Mavic 3 is worth it. I think having extra batteries is worth it, even though the battery life is quite long now. And then 3, I think DJI stands by their products really well. So they're a good partner to have.
I quite like it too, how you can charge the drone, charge the drone actually, or the battery in the drone. Now you can actually plug the USB-C in, and it's quite a game changer really for people that travel and that kind of thing.
Big advantage. You're right. That's a great point. So yeah, those are things that are really important that don't always come out to a lot of people when looking at the research, but it's fantastic. But so yeah, this is Mavic 2. All future work will be Mavic 3. I'm sorry? Oh, well, that's what we used to use. And Melissa's just saying we used to use Phantom 4s, we used to use Inspires. I had the original M600. I schlepped down to Antarctica, which I will never do again. So I've gone through quite a few drones over the years. In fact, real quick story, when I first got into drones, this is probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I bought these really inexpensive ones at the store, brought them home, didn't read the instructions at all, of course, popped it up in the air, boom, went into the water. Ruined, first flight. Call up the store, said, hey, look, I was just in, like another drone. They're like, oh, sure. I said, okay, I was just in, hold one for me. Great. Went in, got it, came home, popped it up in the air, boom, straight into the water. 2 down. I was like, okay, I called up the store. I said, hey, look, I just called, and they just started laughing. They started laughing. They're like, did you actually put another one in the water? I'm like, yes. They go, okay, you want us to hold the 3rd one for you? I'm like, I'll be right there to pick it up. 3rd one goes up in the air, right in the water. So I tend to learn more by trial and error than reading the instruction book.
Oh man, yeah, that's not a good feeling too when the drone does things you don't want it to do. So,
Those are the really super inexpensive ones. But in the beginning, I crashed my drones too. Because I was always trying to push it creatively, always trying to push it beyond my skill set, truthfully. And now, I don't have those issues, but that is a process for learning, right, and creating.
I've flown with Paul before with drones, and I'm very familiar with the concept of pushing it as far as you can. I think Paul's kind of the expert at landing with about 1% battery left and things like that. So, yeah, it's always a very adrenaline-inducing experience when Paul's involved.
School, Roger. Yeah, just push it, baby. It's just a tool. How far can this thing go? Let's see what she's got. Yeah.
But isn't that a little scary though when the battery is running low and you're like, I don't know if it's going to make it back or not.
Oh yeah, and yeah, plenty of long walks where it has it as well. I just try and get it.
You've got some stories, Paul. That's for sure.
I'm good. I think my longest walk is about 2.5 k's to go rescue it, and I remember one that landed in a sand dune and Lukey, and we couldn't get it for about 6 hours the next morning or something. And I think Lukey spent about an hour and a half trying to get the sand out of it for me.
It was like a salt shaker. It was unreal. Yeah, I've never seen anything like it, and I was still fine after. Probably made a few extra noises, but yeah, you got a fair bit more out of that one, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I've been going through. My latest issue, Roger, is wedge-tailed eagles have taken a real affinity for not liking my drones. So I'm making sure that I'm not flying in eagle season and that I know where the local eagle nests are. And because I'm a qualified commercial pilot, I'm not quite as experienced as Lukey, but I've had a pretty good run for the last 3 years now. But yeah, there's one pair on the island that I'm at they've got the smell. They can smell it from miles away, and they'll follow me around the island, even if it's nowhere near their nest. And the last flight I did with them, they hit it 4 times in one flight, and I was literally just trying to land the entire time. And there's 4 times with the drone's like, and that's the video. Like, how is it still alive? And it lands with like missing bits of it's making a weird noise and just wobbling in the air, and there's like half of its propellers are missing, and I don't even know how it's still in the air. And I was like, I just replaced the propellers and up she went. One before, not so lucky. I was literally in the air 60 seconds. I saw the eagles come over the back of a hill. I thought straight away, right, this is their territory, I'm landing. And as I was landing, they dive bombed it and just destroyed it. And it literally landed at my feet in about 15 different pieces. So I think once they got a taste for it, there's certain pairs, you need to be. I mean, it's their world, man. Where I'm intruding in their space, and that's the way I see it. I don't see it the other way around.
Yeah, I agree with you. So what are your favorite places that you've used your drone in all these years?
Well, that's expanding. Like I originally was just, I live in Tasmania, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world in its own way, Roger, if you ever get here, and I hope you do. It's one of the great jewels.
I feel like you might have to return the favor, Paul.
By the way, I've been to Tasmania.
Yeah, okay.
25 years ago.
Really? Oh, you got it just before me. I've been here 23 years. Yeah.
Great. And I plan on coming back. I love
just getting it ready for me. Yeah.
Spectacular country.
I think, I was very, I wouldn't say anti-drone, but I had no interest in them whatsoever very early on. I was like, what do you mean you can only fly 3 kilometers? What do you mean you can only go 400 feet high? What do you mean? I mean, and everyone just hates them, gets annoyed by them. And the dynamism of sitting there and staring at a phone screen and listening to a mosquito going is nothing to hanging out on a harness on a chopper and 200-kilometer wind force with a big, high resolution system in your hand with all the flexibility and creative potential. And Tasmania, right from the word go, more than 50 or 60% of this country you're not allowed to fly no matter what, straight away. And all the places I wanted to fly, the national parks here is just brutally shut down on them right from the beginning, more than anywhere in the whole of Australia, actually. So it didn't instantly appeal to me as an option for what I wanted to do. And I think Luke is the one who actually, there's a little pattymiller next to me. Hang on, buddy.
I remember you seeing someone, an aerial photographer in WA's shot, and you were like, I can't believe
That's right.
that's taken
It
with
was,
a drone. And then the next minute, I reckon within a week, you had a drone.
oh no, it was within like half an hour. I was judging the Australian Professional Photography Awards, and I never thought the image quality was up to it. Roger was another reason. Like the video has been for a long time, but the actual stills image quality to me was just really wasn't quite there for the more affordable systems anyway. And then I was judging one of Chris Saunders' images. I didn't know it was his. And then afterwards I found out it was a drone shot, and I was just like, it was impeccable and the print quality. And I was just like, that's it. There's no excuses anymore. If you can, convince me to judge something as a gold distinction on the AFRA Awards and it's from a drone, it's got to be as good as anything you can create. And I literally within half an hour walked across the trade floor and I bought one. And I sort of hightailed on the back of Lukey in the early days, and he taught me quite a bit. And then yeah, as Lukey knows, I'm a bit of a pusher. I really I did a trip around Southwest WA with my good friend Scott McCook.
Sure.
And he's been my traditional partner for a lot of my big aerial and remote area adventures around Australia. And we decided together we'll buy one because we were just like, we thought they sucked. And we thought, well, we're not talking from experience here. And we did a 3,000 kilometer road trip around the Southwest Australia with nothing but drones every day, all day. And we pushed everything you could possibly push and made every mistake you could possibly make. And I don't know how the hell we came back with our drones, but we did. And we got some pretty good material, and we learned a lot, and we sort of recognized the potential for what they can do. Like the intimacy of the video, I think is unparalleled by just about anything in the world in terms of how close you can get to your subject matter, and that sense of real engagement you can have that you've just shown us in that video. Like it's just pulls you in a way that is almost impossible to run another craft, at least on a certain budget anyway. If you had an unlimited budget with choppers and all the licenses, you could get a lot of that material too. But now it's just with me wherever I go. It's a constant travel companion. Even if I'm going on an aerial safari, like I just did a 5-week aerial safari around Australia, and I took the drones and I flew that everywhere as well. So it's just picking and choosing its place and its capacity, understanding its limitations, and delving into its creative potential, which is quite limitless, really.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great tool, and it really allows you to feel the experience different ways, right? Like I love hanging out a helicopter or a plane like you all do. And I also love having the film component. It's not an either or. To me, it's about bringing it to life, right? The idea of nature to life in different ways. And speaking of your friend Scott, I mean, talk about another exceedingly talented artist, right? His work blows my mind as much as yours is. I mean, you both, like, I look at your work, I'm like, that is killing me. It's so gorgeous. I mean, it's just phenomenal. He's truly another gifted artist.
Yeah, he's an artist through and through. It's look out world when he's got sort of the complete freedom and time to really dig in. Scotty gets very intermittent opportunities to really operate his craft, because of the way he lives and the businesses he runs. And when he does, he might do a shoot and he might get 6 months or a year worth of edits out of one flight, and what he can create over a period of time, and the diversity of interpretation he can come with from just one trip is beyond anyone I've ever met in the world, actually.
No, there's no question about that. And I would add, in addition to that, the level of world-class aerial artists in Australia and New Zealand, obviously Tasmania, is quite remarkable. I mean, the work that comes out of there, constantly, to me, is inspiring, constantly inviting. And it's one of the reasons I want to come to Australia and fly, is because I see all this amazing work by these such talented people. And it just feels like Australia sort of owns the aerial world, so to speak.
Well, I mean, we don't have that kind of objectivity, I guess, from a global perspective. We just do what we do. But having, been more exposed to an international sort of understanding of what's out there and the kind of work that's been doing as time's gone by, I've started to recognise that, and I've got to know pretty much all of the top guys in Australia and a lot more around the world now. And I think quite simply, Roger, like it's the flattest continent on Earth.
Yeah.
And you can drive 800 kilometers and see the same view out the window the entire time in this country. It is massive. And it's 80% desert. And you just don't get a sense of the complexity of the interconnectivity of nature and all the constructs that are going on in the landscape from a land-based level. It pretty much just looks like a brownie orange heat haze out the window 90% of the time from a ground level. And it's very difficult to apart from, isolated in specific places that, start getting that dimensionality about them. And so it just really alludes to an aerial perspective. And when you do, it has some of the strongest color complements I've ever seen, some of the reddest reds and bluest blues I've ever seen in the world, apart from maybe the blues that you're showing us now. But even then, I've been where I was looking with my eyeballs and it almost hurt. It was so blue, it was so red, it was so green. I'm just like, am I seeing things? Is my brain working properly here? Like, it's color palette we have to work with is exquisite, and often they're right next to each other. Particularly on the coastal levels in West Australia. I mean, West Australia is probably my paramount place. But I just did a trip where I went almost around every single state of Australia, and I've got some new areas that I'm just sort of exploring that are kind of blowing me away. I think it really is. It's an aerial photographer's paradise, and I think one of my other favorite areas is actually Death Valley, actually. Roger, I've got a bit of an ongoing love affair and some long-going projects there, both from an abstract and a more literal point of view. I've done about 3 trips out there now, and that's got me going like almost nowhere in the world as well. And I haven't sort of released a lot of that work yet because I'm sort of been sitting on it, sort of building it up. But I think Spain has some incredible.
Sorry to interrupt, but just thought we've probably got about 10-15 minutes left. So just thought we'd make sure that we can get Roger's final thoughts, and maybe he's got a selection of images he hasn't shown us yet that would be really good to see.
What would you feel best about making sure you cover the bases for and the rest of the show?
I already feel good. This has been like really fun. The fact that there's 10 minutes left is fascinating. It's gone by quickly. So I'm good. I'm good wherever you guys are, wherever you want to end. I'm very relaxed about it.
Well, you know more what you got up your sleeve than we do, Roger. So feel free to just go wherever you want to go.
I'll ask Melissa. But we'll show. We're going to show you, even though it's not landscape, it's going to be, and I'll tell you a quick story with it because it really goes back to drones, adventure. So in Greenland, one of the things I fell in love with was narwhals.
I saw these on your website, Roger, and I was just breathtaking by them.
And so my pilot again happened to find them, and we just spent as much time as possible, with as much fuel as we had, to go photograph them. And when we went back to see them the following year, and obviously they're always moving, I wanted to film them. And my pilot said to me, well, we don't have a camera on the helicopter. I go, I know, but I have an idea. And I said, before you tell me no, just listen to me. Because I thought for sure he was going to tell me it's just crazy, we're not going to do it. I said, we're up on Petermann Glacier, which is northwest Greenland. It's a very important glacier for scientists to study because it's really an ice tongue. It's the longest ice tongue, and just water underneath it for like kilometers and kilometers. I said, here's what I want you to do. I see the narwhals in the ocean. I want you to land the helicopter right here. I'm going to get out. I'm going to walk 50 meters away. I'm going to set up the drone. I'm going to take it up to 50 meters. You're going to wait for me. I'm going to come back to the helicopter. I'm going to get in the helicopter where they're going to go to 1,000 feet. And then I'm going to fly the drone while I'm sitting in your helicopter, while you're flying the helicopter. Then we're going to go over the open sea. We're going to find them, and then I'm going to film them.
No way.
And the reason I wanted to do that was I couldn't fly it from the glacier, because once I dropped the drone down, right, I lose direct line of sight.
Direct line of sight. Yeah.
So my pilot goes, so say this again. I go, I want you to land. I'll walk away. I'll set the drone. I know you don't want to crash the helicopter or the drone. Just give me a minute and then I'll come back and then we'll go fly together. I'll fly the drone in the helicopter while you fly the helicopter. And I'm thinking, oh, he's going to tell me no, because I know he's incredibly safety conscious. And he goes, yeah, I think we can do that. And so that's what we did. We landed, we did the whole process. I get back in, we fly over the sea. There's no real way to have a reference point to flying the drone because it's open water. We finally find the narwhals. All of a sudden, after like 10 minutes of filming the narwhals, the battery says it's got to fly home. So I say to my pilot, we got to get back. The drone's going to go back. And so we start to fly back.
The home point of where you took off from?
Yes.
Right.
The issue is even GPS for the helicopter doesn't tell you exactly where you took off from. So as we're flying back, I'm like, well, are you going to land? He goes, well, I'm not quite sure exactly where we should land. I'm like, the battery is down to like 12%.
Oh, shit.
Then it's like getting down to 9%. So I said, look, I'm getting out of the helicopter. Just land, and then I need you to take off. Just like take off because, as we all know, when the batteries go low, the drones can be erratic. So I've got this drone coming back. I just recalibrate. I hit home to where I am, not to where I took off. And you can see it's a great shot. It happened all by itself. The drone's coming, and in the background, like a quarter mile behind, you can see the helicopter circling behind me, and it comes to me, and then I brought it back. And we did this 4 times in total. Each time was nerve-wracking, but the footage is unbelievable. So I would just end our conversation on the photographs. We do have amazing drone footage of literally like 24 narwhals at one point together. Right? I'm sorry, yeah, there's also another like 14 next to them. So two pods of almost 40 narwhals. And it was just pure, it was nerve-wracking, it was exciting, it was dramatic, it was uncertain, it was insane. And I feel like that's what life should be. It should be all those things and full of joy and love. And you just own it. Good, bad outcome, whatever it is, you own it because it's your experience and you've created it, you've lived it, and now it becomes part of who you are. So.
And is there somewhere we could see that? You've got the footage here. I was just wondering if you could reshare perhaps and just click on optimize.
Yeah, this will be a very brief video, but this is one that Melissa, by the way, does all the amazing editing put together.
Oh my.
Oh, look at that. Goodness me.
Jeez. Oh my God. Talk about leaving you breathless.
You know,
Yes.
this is why we all do what we do, to have those moments. And for me, I don't know how it is. I'm curious for you too. Like when I watch that and I know what it took to go film that, I also know what my entire life is there in that moment. Like all the hardship, right? For Paul, like, you and I lost our fathers at an early age. All of our life, the pleasures the principles of life, the pain we've been through, the dreams, everything that, and those, I feel all of that. And that's why, for me, the art and the sharing of it is I'm sharing my life and expressing who I am and what I've been through, what I've accomplished, and what I believe in. Like, for me, it's very deeply personal. I feel all of it very deeply. So it's always more than what is, it's what it took to be there. And the message is that we can transform our lives. We can make a difference to others, to the planet, to nature, and that there is an innate and natural beauty in all that surrounds us. So that's why I love doing what I do. It's my whole life. It's my heart.
Oh man. Yeah, it's for people that aren't so familiar with Roger's work, Roger has a capacity to express himself in both photographs and film, but also through words and through writing. And even just going through the website and the blog that you have, Roger, just the eloquence and thoughtfulness and just utter depth that ripples through, your written word, and just weaves through the visuals at the same time. There's not many people in the world that have that breadth of skill set, that they can apply themselves equally through all those different mediums. So I'm looking forward to getting to that a little bit more, actually, and doing a bit more reading, and I think it's even more of an insight into who you are, Roger, and what you believe in, and the value systems that you have, and the filter that you engage the world through, and yeah, it's a real testament to who you are, I think, and another layer again. And
always inspiring to find someone that'll I need to do this for me, and I think I can make it work, but it's important that I do this. It's very personal to me, and that's what we do in our art, and to be motivated by that is a very pure thing. So well done.
Thank you very much.
All right.
So,
well, yeah.
how would you send people to engage with yourself and sort of what you've done and what you're hoping to do?
I'm sorry, I missed that last thing. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, where would you suggest people go to engage with your work and your projects and to connect with your creativity?
They obviously can go to my website, to Instagram, but I would hope that today people walk out of it and go, wow, here are three guys who are connecting with their hearts and their souls with nature and with creativity and with sharing it. And I would hope that people just go out and do it on their own, take out their iPhone, take out their camera, whatever, or just, by the way, just lay down on the grass and look at the sky. I would just say, stay connected to the great, like where you are, like stay connected to what already exists. And if they want to go look at my work, that's fantastic. But I'd say just stay connected and keep caring.
Beautiful. Well, on that note, Roger, we'll leave it there, and it's been just a absolutely fascinating and very inspiring conversation. We really thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your time. And both of you, Iceland. Both of you, Iceland.
Sounds pretty amazing.
I've already started the saving plan in the back of my head. And I'm pretty legit on that invitation.
All right. Well, we'll follow up after this with both of you. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you again, and until next time. See you.
Absolutely. All the best. Bye-bye.